All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the afternoon session. If I could please have your attention. Thank you very much. I hope you had a wonderful lunch. On this side, please, if we can please have your attention. There we go. So next up in the program, I'd like to invite the Finance Minister from South Africa to deliver a keynote speech, Mr. Tito Mboweni.
I hope this works. Program Director, thank you very much for having me this afternoon. I suppose the reason why they wanted me to say something is to make sure that I can account for my air ticket coming here. Because really everything that needs to be said has been said already. So good afternoon. It is indeed a singular honor and privilege for me to stand here before you to say a few words on the occasion of this meeting, the G20 Compact with Africa initiative. This is an important program in my view, and preferably should extend beyond just Germany, but also encompass other G20 countries. As you know, South Africa is one member as well of the G20, and we proudly participate in this forum to advance, amongst others, the interests of the developing countries, and Africa in particular. Incidentally, then, when the G20 was started, it was meant to be a coming together of the 20 systemically important countries. When you are in Germany, you can't speak English properly. It's systemically important countries. And the original meetings used to be attended by ministers of finance and governors of central banks, until we made a mistake one year when we began to issue statements, and that attracted the attention of the heads of states, and they took it over. This program here in Germany has already shown a lot of productive outcomes. Today we witnessed, amongst other things, the signing of agreements between German companies and African countries. This for us in Africa is very important, as it seeks to promote closer cooperation between African countries and Germany and Germany's companies. South Africa, as a member of the G20 group of countries, also promotes vigorously investment by South African companies into the African continent. Already, South African companies are invested in banking and finance, in wholesale and retail trade, mining, engineering activities, and manufacturing. I bear testimony to this, as at a practical level, I was chairman of two of the companies which were heavily invested in Africa in manufacturing and also in mining. In South Africa itself, we have many German companies which are heavily invested. At the risk of irritating some of my colleagues from Germany, let me mention that there are about 600 German companies in South Africa, creating well over 90,000 direct jobs and probably another 90 indirect jobs. Just to increase competition amongst them, let me mention a few. Volkswagen, BASF, SAP, if they're here. Of course, I have to mention Siemens, BMW, Mercedes-Benz. And please, let's increase the list so I can mention all of you in future. Of course, in South Africa, we face a number of challenges. Amongst others, low growth, high unemployment, which have to be confronted head on. As part of the process of creating an environment conducive for investment, we're working on a number of structural reforms. One, modernizing network industries to promote competitiveness and inclusive growth. Secondly, lowering barriers to entry and addressing distorted patterns of ownership through increased competition and small business growth. Three, prioritizing labor-intensive growth sectors such as agriculture, tourism, and other sectors. For example, we've just liberalized the visa requirement into South Africa and removed the restrictions on the visits by what I call the young tourists, children. Fourth, implementing focused and flexible industrial and trade policies to promote competitiveness and facilitate long-run growth. And lastly, promoting export industries and harnessing regional growth opportunities. Dear colleagues, as we noticed this morning, it is important for our own countries to develop their own policies which attract investment. And some of the initiatives undertaken which follow good policies are indeed to be appreciated. Over the past fortnight or so, we've witnessed in South Africa two very important investment conferences. The first one, a South African investment conference, which attracted not less than 363 billion rand of commitments in investments. We also witnessed the second African investment conference, headed by my brother here, Dr. Adesina is going to speak for himself. But the key issue is that if we combine the achievements made at the Africa Investment Conference, the South African Investment Conference, and this conference together, we have made a huge set of strides in a very short space of time. And so conferences like this are not just talk shops, they are real investment conferences, which we so much appreciate. The Development Bank of South Africa has also invested quite heavily in Southern Africa, in fact, as far as Ghana as well, therefore making South Africa's contribution in the investment drive in Africa very important. Let me end off here by once again appreciating the initiative by Chancellor Merkel for having this G20 compact with Africa, and also to thank you, German businessmen and women, for participating effectively and with a lot of enthusiasm in this project. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Minister Mboweni. I think we can all agree that he's the funniest man here today. And to give a keynote speech, it is my pleasure to welcome the Minister of Economic Affairs and Energy of the Federal Republic of Germany, Honorable Peter Altmaier. Well, Minister Mboweni, any ideas? Is he there? Okay, he's arriving. Better late than never. A round of applause for the minister as he walks in.
Good afternoon, einen wunderschönen guten Tag, Exzellenzen.
Good afternoon,
Minister,
Excellencies,
sehr geehrter Herr Professor
Ministers, Professor Liebig, Professor Grosse, ladies and gentlemen. Congratulations for organizing and holding this Africa conference in the House of the German Businesses. The fact that we're here marks an important shift of perspective in our joint cooperation. The classic forms of development cooperation were important and remain important for the future. But a new element has been added. And it is that we have felt and learned on the African continent, as well as here in Germany, that the big opportunities whose home Africa is can only be used if we use more market economic forms of cooperating. Development aid is important, but it alone cannot solve the problems. And this is why we all have a common goal. We want to foster private investments in Africa. Today is at the heart of this objective. We have this wonderful conference here in the House of the German Business, but we also have the Compact with Africa and the Chancellor's Conference with the heads of state and government and 5 ministers that will continue throughout the afternoon until late at night. We'll look into these topics as well. And I believe that it is more than justified. I mean, I see a few colleagues from the German parliament here. I've seen Andreas Lemmer and other colleagues who are committed to put Africa more at our focus. And the Federal Minister of the Economy, myself, I am convinced that we must place Africa at the heart of our efforts. It's a matter of justice and equality of opportunities, but it's also a matter of common interests. And so we can already ask the question, what is going to happen after this leap-like digital innovation that has seized our economies? What's going to be the next wave of innovation? Will it be quantum computing? Will it be biotech? Will it be other areas? And while asking this question, we also wonder what is going to happen after the comic-like soaring of the countries in Asia Pacific with these enormous growth rates. What will happen next in the globalized economy? Which countries, which continents will catch up and will be able to seize the opportunity to tap their potential? And then we have to look at this important neighboring continent that we have, Africa. Ever since I was the Minister for the Environment, I have looked into African perspectives. As a Minister of the Chancellery, working for the Chancellor Merkel, ever since then I did that. And I think we have never seen as much momentum in Africa than we see it today. 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies are to be found in Africa. Djibouti, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal. And so these countries have growth rates of more than 7%. In 2050, around 25% of the world population will be coming from Africa. And the question is, do we in Europe know enough about this great continent? Are we capable of gauging all these opportunities? Do we seize all these opportunities as far as we can? And this goes not only for renewable energies, digitization, or green tech. This applies to all sorts of different economic sectors. And this is why we must improve the information we have at hand. This is why we need to improve the state support. We must create contacts and networks and contribute to seizing this new momentum. In 2018, 45 billion was the trade volume between Africa and Germany. Now we've seen in the first half year an increase by 9% as compared to the first half year of the previous year. And this in spite of Germany not being at the peak of its economic cycle right now. And this means that the trade relations with Africa are flourishing right now. But we have not come to the end of this potential. The framework conditions are still defying. If we talk to the businesses who are willing to invest in Africa, who are willing to do business with Africa, then there is always the topic of the lack of skilled labor, indebtedness, insecurity, and in some places even corruption. We need to work on this, but in such a way that it does not put down Africa as an industrial site, but we need to show the big respect that we in Germany have for Africa. Around half of German businesses who are present in Africa expect better business and better business conditions over the next 12 months. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Wansleben, your enthusiasm shows me that a lot has already changed. And this is why we want to make sure that trade and investments will be able to contribute in the future as well, that the economic development and the creation of jobs will continue. Because one thing is important as well. The population growth, the fact that it is so strong in Africa means that we need to make huge efforts in order to keep up the pace with the economic cooperation. When at the peak of the migration wave, the Chancellor went to Niger and she spoke to people responsible there. There was one number that was very puzzling to me, that in Niger there are 18 million inhabitants right now, and that this number until the end of the century will grow to around 100 million. Today, the average age is of less than 15, and we are observing a revolution there, and we need to co-shape this revolution in such a way that at the end of the day it will lead to positive results for everybody that concerns education policy, infrastructure policy, but also the economic and the trade policy. We want to make sure that in the African states as well there is a culture of small and medium-sized companies who want that these many SMEs that are committed in Africa find partners there with whom they can develop their business models together. And this is why we support the European Union when it comes to concluding ambitious trade and investment programs. We have economic partnership agreements with the countries of sub-Saharan Africa. They have to be implemented and they must be filled with life. We want Africa as a market for the small and medium-sized companies, not only for big corporations. It is really market for the SMEs. It represents own initiative, creativity, ideas, the willingness to take risks and responsibility. And there is a lot of interest and understanding for this in Africa. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, I can see that I'm threatened with the continuation of the program and that we need to move on. But let me just say, to conclude, that we want that the lighthouse projects work out and that our support measures will contribute to empower the businesses in place. So we want to support the SMEs, and with our economic network Africa, we have created a new initiative, and I would like to thank the members of parliament and those who are responsible for making that happen. We have 3 pilot projects in 3 countries and 3 sectors that have been launched. All this, ladies and gentlemen, is just the start. In 10 days' time, we have the first mixed economic commission with our pilot country, Ghana, with which we want to put these cooperations on specific grounds. Ghana is an important country, But this is just the start, and further economic conferences and cooperations will follow suit. I know that Mr. Kannengieser does not agree with the economic subsidies for foreign investments, but with Hermes credits, we have paved the way for important improvements. As of now, all compact with Africa countries benefit of the deductible reduced to 5%. And as this is a task that will be there for many years, we need more German chambers of commerce abroad, more skills. And when our law for the immigration for skilled laborers comes into force, we will make sure that this is implemented in an intelligent way that benefits all. So thank you very much to all those who were involved in making this happen. We support you as good as we can. We are open for ideas, and my staff and my state secretaries are looking forward to helping you wherever it is possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Please stay on the stage. Yes, please remain on the stage as we've now entered the next part of the program, which is the signing ceremony. And we'll have three types, which I will explain to you as we go along. And I'd also like to request the signing partners to be prepared to come on stage when I call you up for the interest of time. And we'll begin with Côte d'Ivoire, with the establishment of a delegation of industry and commerce in Abidjan. The network of German chambers of commerce abroad is an important instrument of Germany's foreign trade promotion and a famous institution worldwide, connecting representatives of politics, industry, associations, and other relevant parties in Germany and its host. And as of today, this network represents German business interests in 92 countries with 140 locations, and we wish to extend this network even further. So without much further ado, you can already see him on stage, the Honorable Adama Coulibaly, the Minister of Finance and Economy for the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire. And I would also like to call, oh, he's already there, Dr. Martin Van Slieben, who is the Chief Executive of the Association of German Chambers of Commerce, in whose presence the documents will be exchanged. Yeah, they've already been signed, you just need to exchange them. Making sure everything is fine. An extra signature never hurt anyone. Thank you. Thank you very much. Minister Altmaier, please remain there. Thank you, Minister from Côte d'Ivoire. Next up, we have a project with Ethiopia, a joint declaration of intent on a projects-based energy cooperation. Now, this cooperation will provide a general framework for implementing selected projects to ensure political dialogue and cooperation in the energy sector. The focus is on business models and strategies for solar-based rural electrification and on rehabilitation of existing larger hydropower stations in Ethiopia. And as he is already on stage, the Honorable Seleshi Bekele, we saw him earlier, the Honorable Minister of Energy from Ethiopia, they will now be signing that document of intent. Honorable Bekele, thank you very much. Honorable Altmaier, please remain on the stage. We're still not done. Project now, another one in Ethiopia with Foyt Hydro, with the Ministry of Water, Irrigation and Electricity for the country there. This will be the signing of 2 years operations maintenance service agreement between the Ethiopian Electric Power and Foyt Hydro East Africa Consultancy. This agreement is focused on optimizing the electricity production at the existing 420 megawatt Gibe 2 hydropower plant by improving the maintenance systems, implementation of digital solutions, and knowledge transfer via specialized training programs. And with the minister is Mr. Mark Klaassen. He is the Managing Director, Foyt Hydro East Africa Consultancy. And these agreements are being signed by third parties and being witnessed, of course, by Minister Altmaier. Next up, we're heading to Benin. The government of Benin took the initiative to enter into a memorandum of understanding with KFW, IPEX Bank, the aim of which is to create a favorable environment to develop tourism, much needed infrastructure, as well as strengthening the economy of the coastline of Benin. And on stage, you can see the Honorable Minister of Finance from Benin, Mr. Romuald Wadangi. I'm pretty sure I didn't say your name right. I'm very sorry. And Mr. Klaus Makelak, who is the CEO of KFW IPEX Bank. Thank you. Fantastic. Okay, now Minister, I'd like you to please take a seat in the center because I'm about to invite to stage, as you wish. That one is fine, yeah. I'd like to invite to the stage Gregor Wolf. He is a member of the Executive Board of the Federation of Wholesale Foreign Trade and Services, and he's going to be moderating a panel discussion. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Auch ich heiße Sie ganz herzlich willkommen bei dieser.
A very warm welcome from my side as well for this first panel, and I would first of all welcome Minister Altmaier, Federal Minister of Economic Affairs and Energy. Thank you for your time. You're perfectly right. Especially for your Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy, it is particularly important to be present. It is not only a subject of development cooperation, what we are talking about today. I would like to now welcome the other panelists, Isabel Knauf, Member of Group Management at Knauf, a traditional German SME. Mr. Touri from Senegal is another guest. Welcome. And finally, Dr. Wansleben, Chief Executive Officer of the German Association of German Chambers of Commerce. Of course, you know him all. We've heard a lot about many projects. We have signed many a document, and I would now like to look towards the future and see where we can still improve things and where maybe still some shortcomings, so that Africa is not only a continent of opportunities, but they can take up these opportunities as well. To do so, of course, the German Ministry of Economics and Affairs and Energy is an important interlocutor. Minister Altmaier, what would be the instruments from your point of view that companies, that enterprises can use more frequently to take up these opportunities in Africa? Well, first of all, exchange of information. What is going on where? Then reliability of information. Together with our partner countries, we have to clearly design what we want to do. With some partner countries, we have agreed on fast-track agreements. Mrs. Knauf has already witnessed that as well. Companies who get into difficulties in one country are supported then so that they can make use of their rights. And we need money. Without money, the nicest programs cannot be put into practice. So we would always do everything we can that our funds will multiply in the ministry. I would also like to thank you for your support in the context of the OECD consensus, an important framework for making funds available. There is a working group convening today in Paris, producing a new convention paper. Thank you very much for supporting us also in this task. Mrs. Knauf, you have a lot of experience gathered on the African continent. From your point of view, what were your hopefully positive experiences with the German government, and where do you still see more opportunities for support or need for support? Yes, especially during this year, I had a very fruitful and positive experience with the German Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy. Mr. Altmaier just introduced me to Mr. Assisi and said, you have to listen to this lady. Knauf is producing 1/6 of foreign direct investments in Egypt. We have a new plant, and 5 months later, we didn't have a license anymore to operate this plant, whereas we didn't do anything that was not conform to the rule, was not according to the rules. And thanks to the minister's intervention and his admonishing the Egyptian side, we can now again operate this plant and work with our own quarries in Egypt. Thank you very much for your help. That is very good to hear. No, we couldn't, not have been able to solve this problem ourselves. We need political support. As long as we only do trade, we do commerce in these countries, you can still decide whether you want to be present there or not. But once you're there, once you have built a plant there, then you're something like a captive customer, and you will have to play the cards that you get. That's not always very funny, especially in today's environment of compliance. It's not only a legal question. Once you're no longer on the right path, you will have difficulties again and again. So it is really a very good thing to be in contact with representatives of German government, with the embassies, the ambassadors. I would really like to thank also the German embassy in Nigeria, who have often helped me out. There is at least a certain degree of protection if you work together with governments. Thank you. I'm happy to hear that this protection is there when you need it. Another question. What would be your expectations vis-à-vis the local governments? The German government cannot always solve all the problems on the world. We will have to cooperate also with local governments. Yes, you're right. We are a traditional SME, family-owned, with of 11 billion turnover, and we finance ourselves. We do not need funds from outside, but what we need is a well-functioning infrastructure, licenses, authorizations, and transparency concerning utilities. In my investment decisions, I often get problems because you don't have a port, or fees are too high at the port. For example, I would like to build a plant in Ghana, but they want $10 for treating the goods in the port. It's 3 times more than in Dubai and 5 times more than in Spain. And this would mean that the entire country will be lagging behind. But if such a port is given to a private person, there is no competition. That is something that is similar in other countries like Nigeria, Tanzania. I'm now building a huge, beautiful plant in Nigeria with 19 containers of electronic equipment that was lost all of a sudden. We thought we couldn't get it back, this equipment, electronic equipment. Then all of a sudden they found it, and then they wanted us to pay 5 weeks of storage for these containers. These are often experiences we have in these countries. So there are barriers for investment, first of all. Then often there is no clear situation concerning the question whether they have enough energy, as for example gas. If they want to attract companies, plants, we have to also provide the energy. Or we can also provide our own electricity, but we need to have natural gas coming directly to our plant. So no need to have 5 or 7 different people who say, I am entitled to sell gas to you. And that was the experience we made in Ghana and also in Nigeria. The entire plant could not really be built because we have no reliable answer to our question, when do we get how much gas to operate our plant? Thank you very much for this very practical and detailed examples. That's often the case why a project is successful or not. I would now like to talk about another project.
And that is in Senegal. Mr. Tahori, welcome to Berlin. You have just concluded a project with a German partner. Maybe you could let us know a few words about that, and then let us know something about financing, because other than for Ms. Knauf, this is still something that is of importance to you.
Thank you so much. I represent sauerkraut industry, which is based in Diamniadio in Senegal. And it is my pleasure to be with you today. It's a real forum that we would like to use to draw your attention to a given dimension, something that was recurring throughout the whole morning. We broached on the subject of different companies, so most of them were German companies that were starting business in Africa and developing a number of programs in that framework. That's all very nice and well. We do appreciate this cooperation between Germany and a variety of African countries, but our own project is quite innovative in that it is an African initiative, actually. It is tiered by African countries. So African stakeholders that were in need of funding and that decided to join forces. So it is a partnership between Germany and Africa in that regard. And this is what made it possible to roll out this given initiative. So sauerkraut industry is a high technology project. It's about manufacturing biometric products, payment terminals, and payment cards. So it's about security, it's about technology, it's about payments. So it wasn't a given to actually touch upon these subjects in Africa. We were not able to be granted local support, which is why we're very appreciative of this partnership. So 2 African engineers, Mr. Amadou Tinyanuan, who's an engineer who specializes in IT and industrial applications. He worked for Thales Identification in France for a number of years. He worked for Overture. So he was skilled enough to actually produce these payment cards and to manufacture identification cards. He was a pioneer in the biometric passport endeavor in Africa. And he's the general director of sauerkraut industry. He's in the room. Could you actually get up on your 2 feet so that people can see you? And this was a struggle, actually. I'm the chair of the executive board of this company. I specialize in monetary matters for banking purposes, mobile payment solutions, mobile finances. And this is quite a difficult task to achieve a certain level of cohesion in Africa for this purpose. Public authorities went the extra length, the extra mile to fight the financial exclusion, financial marginalization phenomenon, so that people could actually carry out transfers and have access to these resources. And despite all best efforts, the penetration rate for payment cards is at 3% in this region, meaning that a large part of the economy is informal at this stage. It is still informal. So it was important for us to come up with a solution to even though it's not possible to achieve a higher rate of penetration, we need to come up with some payment schemes, and we need to be able to track the various payments. So this is what we tried to do when we set up this platform, this payment platform, and we rolled out an industrial payment program so that credit cards would become more accessible and more affordable within a short period of time. Because if I apply for a credit card in Africa, I will need at least 3 weeks before I get this card, and most people are not even literate, so even if you get your credit card, you can only use it in a city surrounding. 75% of the population doesn't have a credit card, and we need to come up with a solution so that people can actually take part in the economic activity, even though they don't have a credit card. But it's quite difficult to assess and to come up with forecast in that framework. So this is why we came up with this idea, and this is why we set up this project. We found a partner in Germany, Malvec. So Mavic Consultancy, the industry consultancy, that provided us with the necessary structure for this funding. And we were granted 25 million euros by ACABank within 2 installments. The first installment, 9 million euros, is currently being rolled out, and it enabled us to buy the equipment. And we've got a plant in Dumbarton at this stage. And I'd like to seize this opportunity to extend my congratulations to the authorities that were involved in this process, because this was actually an alliance between 2 dimensions, with some state decisions made by local authorities, because the equipment that we use is used to generate credit cards, and this is very costly equipment. So the custom tariffs account to 46% of the global value of this product. And thanks to ACABank, we're able to fund the equipment, the purchasing of the equipment. So once you have this equipment, you need to get it out of the country, and you need to pay about half of this amount to achieve this result. We're not like the previous speakers. We don't have these resources. So we needed to find the money that was necessary to invest in this equipment, but we needed to have the support of the local authorities as well. And Senegal, the government, made it possible for us to find a site within this hub, and we don't have to pay for custom tariffs. Otherwise, we would have to pay more than 300 million euros. So the state decided to grant us this facility, so we didn't have to pay this 300 million euros. And we've got 200 young employees, so technicians and engineers. And we can produce as many as 1 million credit cards a month. We've got the capacity to manufacture 300,000 terminal payments, payment terminals a month. And we've also taken an interest in biometric issues so that people that are not literate and that want to authenticate a given transaction only need to use their fingerprints to actually authenticate the transaction. And we've added a solar component so that in rural settings, people are able to use the local network without any electricity. They don't need power to have access to this network. So this enabled us to solve the issue of access to energy. We've been able to solve the issue generated by illiteracy, and we've been able to reach out to a large part of the population that now has access to payment schemes. So I'd like to pay tribute to the German authorities for launching this initiative. Of course, not everything went smoothly. We were faced with a number of difficulties, and I'll get back to that in a second. But being successful in the framework of this project was pivotal. I'd like to thank Bank and NAVAC, our partners, that played a pivotal role in ensuring the success of this operation.
Thank you for this explanation. Obviously, I'm interested to know what were the obstacles when implementing this project, because at the end of the day, it sounds all very smooth, and it's wonderful that you found solutions here. Nevertheless, I believe that the road to achieve this was rather hard and bumpy. Now I would like to get Mr. Van Sleeben involved. First of all, congratulations for having the new delegation in Côte d'Ivoire. We believe that it's an important step to enhance this network with the German Chambers of Commerce abroad. We represent the classic export traders who have been familiar with difficult trade or difficult transactions in markets abroad. As Ms. Knopf said, trade is sometimes a little easier to do than to get a foothold as an industrial player. So right now we have intense discussions in Germany on what standards can be used to measure German business, what are expectations towards businesses when it comes to their action in Germany and abroad. And very often the trend is to demand everything from the businesses and to be responsible for shortcomings in other states, be it to assume responsibility for whatever, because the German businesses are there. We could go to them and ask things for them, but we believe that transformation can only be done through trade, and only if we talk to each other we can change things. How do you see this? Well, this morning the Chancellor said that regarding Africa, and when it comes to cooperation policies, you need to add economic policy. This is why it's great to have the minister here and delivering things. I think that's an important message to have the federal minister for the economy here. So the definition of what is called sustainable is thus enhanced, because the economy is tantamount to sustainable business. And the best sustainable business we can do is that we have a deal, and a year later we meet again and are still happy to have done that deal and think about doing another one. This is what in the economy is sustainability. And this kind of sustainability, Peter Altmaier pointed it out, means that we do everything we can to have big corporations or medium-sized corporations like Knauf, or even smaller businesses, to give them the possibility to make business in Africa and to reflect the diversity of our economic structure in the sense of services, cooperations, to have that translated, because this is one of the biggest skills that we have. We have an astounding, very diverse infrastructure among businesses between very small and very big. And the second aspect is, and Ms. Knauf has hinted at it, we need platforms in place on the ground over there in order to help us mutually or to get help. And what is also important, and that's also a kind of sustainability, to be able to develop things together. And the third aspect is, I mean, it's called Compact with Africa and not for Africa. And I think that this was supposed to be a very clear message to us, because a compact with Africa implies that it's give and take at eye level. It's not us going to Africa and saying, okay, we know how this should be done. I think that would be a very dangerous mindset. It's not just prohibitive, as you pointed out, and rightly so, for businesses. If I, as a medium-sized company and even a small business like Knauf, if I am liable for the entire supply chain, I better not go there, because I cannot control all that. But what is important is we do not forget our own culture. We respect your culture in South Africa, for instance, and we go there and say, okay, there might be a difference. And by a give and take among equal partners, a third solution can come up that we can all live with very well. And I believe, and Peter Altmaier emphasized it, that the honor of the businessman to respect and to honor their partners is the fundamental building block of that. Thank you for these clear words that I can only agree with.
Minister Altmaier, what can we do to even more foster trade with Africa? Well, first of all, Mr. Wansleben just underlined that we need to underline once again our political support. As Minister for Economic Affairs and Energy, I've often seen that the business says politics should not interfere with our matters. But that's something completely different. If, for example, the German government says, we want to produce battery cells here in Europe, that's important for us, and already this statement says that means that in the boards of directors there are certain repercussions on that. So we need input from the political side. Secondly, we need structures. We need sustainable structures, durable in French. Sustainability is, for us, a form of environmental protection. Sustainability means that we have to create structures not only to promote one project, but projects for the next 10, 15 years, projects in the plural. And if we then have SMEs and entrepreneurs who can tell us that in the second or third generation already they are present and active in Africa, then we have created something that it makes more probable, more likely that also the grandchild or grandson or granddaughter will continue with this commitment in Africa. Then very, very clever travels to Africa. Gerd Müller, my minister for Development and Cooperation, was in Africa many, many times, and I will certainly go there soon as well. And it is important that then we have a delegation of entrepreneurs, of business, that we have business talks in the country. I've been traveling around the world, more or less, and always I seeked for conversations with business to know about the conditions in these countries. We don't have to reinvent anything. We only have to do what we have done successfully in the past. And then secondly, you talked about digitization, biometric passes, and so on. Yes, we do have to recognize as well that not only Africans learn from us, but we can learn a lot from Africans as well. For example, our cabinet gathered in Meseberg last week with 2 representatives who studied in the US and also in African countries. Then they came back to their country as IT experts, and these people now contribute to the leadership role of Africa in many an IT sector. And then, again, Germany can help as leader in producing IT, also stable framework conditions, for example, in electricity supply, reliability of data, security, data security. These are clear cases that we can define and that will then contribute to better cooperation also in other sectors. Thank you very much. We take that as the final words, because unfortunately our time is up and Minister Müller has to leave. Thank you so much for being with us. I hope that this was helpful for you for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Merci beaucoup. Et courage.
Thank you very much to our panel for that very
Vielen Dank.
insightful discussion. Now, our next speaker, as you've already heard, is already running late. So let me introduce to stage now, it's my pleasure to invite the Minister of Economic Cooperation and Development of the Federal Republic of Germany, Honorable Minister Dr. Gerd Müller.
Ich habe noch Entschuldigung mit Herrn Altmaier.
Excuse me. I have just spoken quickly to Minister Altmaier because from the signing of the I come from signing our cooperation agreement with the Egyptian minister. Thank you very much. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak here. I would like to thank the organizers, the German African Business Association, and all others who work together with us, the ministry and all the chancellery. And thank you all for being here. Otherwise, the conference would not be a success. The federal government reckons with the successful cooperation with Africa, but there's something more that I want to say. Germany alone is not enough. A new Africa policy must be one of the focus of next year's chairmanship, the German chairmanship of the EU, and the EU needs a new quality of cooperation. After the Cotonou agreement, we need a deepened partnership in a new EU-Africa agreement. Dear guests and friends and partners from the African countries, we are in the final draft of this new EU-Africa agreement. Günther Noke is here, who is leading in many of these negotiation rounds. And in this new partnership agreement, we are laying the foundations over the next 20 years, whether we manage to do that, to come up with new concepts of cooperation. I do not want to go too far, but one of the priorities is the question of security and peace in this new EU-Africa agreement. How do we network? How can we strengthen ourselves? And how can we bring about peace and security, the EU and the AU? Secondly, we need to improve our trade relations. Mr. Van Sleeben has just left, and the Federal Minister of the Economy, I would have liked to tell him that. And fair supply chains are a part of that. Ladies and gentlemen, fair supply chains. This morning we signed an investment. I don't know how many of you were here, that we're supporting an organic chocolate factory in Ghana. I don't know if you remember Miss Ghana, the head of the GIZ. So that's an organic chocolate factory with fair supply chains. 3% of the value of a bar of chocolate that you buy remain with the cocoa farmers. And for coffee beans, it's quite similar. That's 5% for them. 5% is the value of the beans. So, and this is a matter of supply chains. West Africa, Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso. For cotton, I could come up with a similar argument. For coffee, you buy it at 8 to 10 euros per kilo. Of course, the refining, roasting, etc. But the purchasing price of the raw materials is 50 cents. 50 cents on the plantations. And this leads to millions of children working together with their parents in these plantations for our coffee. And the investor for the organic chocolate factory in Ghana shows what the future needs to be. It must be refining and value creation in these countries on the ground, so that jobs are created there, so that the youth has opportunities and a future there. And if over the next 12 months we discuss the topic of fair supply chains, ladies and gentlemen, I mean it in exactly this sense. And I get support from many representatives of businesses who say, yes, all right, instead of having 3% for cocoa or 5% for coffee beans, we need to create more value over there on the ground, offer fair wages and higher standards in the supply chains. Mr. Grosse, many companies do that already, and they document it. And for the majority of companies, the National Action Plan for the Economy and Human Rights is not a threat, but is something that is being implemented right now. But we need to look more deeply into this, because I can tell you my conclusion is we cannot solve the challenges of Africa with public means. We're creating lighthouses. What is important is fair trade and value creation. We see this in other regions on the planet, in Asia, for instance, where hundreds of millions of people have come out of absolute poverty over the last 50 years thanks to fair trade. If I think of China, which among the OECD countries is still considered a developing country, why? 1.2 billion people, of which 200 to 300 million still live in relative or absolute poverty. But China has managed over the last 40 years, thanks to trade, thanks to value creation and trade, to lift more than 400 million people out of absolute poverty. And that must be the key for the African-European cooperation, fair supply chains. And another part of that is, I mean, I'm talking about the EU and Africa and an increased market access. It also means to have African products in the EU. It's not the rule African, but arms. It's not as if African countries could import or export without paying any duties. No, for the North African area, there are duties and quotas, and for the least developed countries, who on paper have free access, but if you think of fish from Mauritania, how is it supposed to come to Berlin? So the State Secretary of Flaxbart, as a vet, she knows that it's 10 big folders of conditions and requirements that need to be fulfilled, health requirements, in order to export fish to Europe. And this is why we need to apply aid for trade and help and open up the access to the market step by step. The Maghreb, I haven't finished yet. You can sit down again. Don't worry. So the North African region needs to be integrated into the European economic area. And this means that we need an overall European strategy for Africa. And I need your support for that. It all sounds like it was easy. But the Brussels budget is a subsidy budget directed towards the inside. It's not an investment budget and no innovation budget directed towards the outside, towards Africa. And if we want to be successful, then the concept of a Marshall Plan for Africa needs to be put on a European level, and the budgets in Brussels earmarked for it must be increased from 5 to 6 billion. That is the plan for the mid-term financing period. That's the next 7 years. Yes, you heard correctly. All 28 European countries. 50 billion for subsidizing agricultural policy in Europe, and 6 billion, Mr. Adesina, is the budget that Brussels has earmarked for developing structures together with the African countries on the African continent. That is not what I would consider as viable. Africa has its own path, the Agenda 2063, that's the African plan. The economic startup makes Africa a growth and opportunity continent. I don't need to detail it all. There's a new study mandated by Handelsblatt Research, and it is very clear it's a growth continent. Population grows faster, the economy grows faster, and in 2030, 600 million Africans will be part of the African middle class, and this will lead to a higher demand for consumption goods that exist in the market, also on the European market. 700 million Africans have mobile phones, half of them smartphones. They demand cars. The German automotive industry is asked, where is the marketable small car for the African continent, but also for India? We don't have an offer for that. And it cannot be the high emission, stinking second-hand or old car from Europe that we outsource there and send to African countries. This is not in line with the climate protection that we need. Ladies and gentlemen, over the next 10 years, the infrastructure on the African company will expand as much as it has in Europe over the last 100 years. This is why we call it a growth and opportunity continent. And let me come to the compact now. I don't need to repeat this, but it's a great day today because we launch the investment and development fund, and the fact that we already invest and use this instrument is remarkable. But what I am particularly happy about, a year ago, on the Doing Business Index, the compact with Africa continents fare particularly well. Ladies and gentlemen, there are 3 pillars necessary for economic success in African countries. First of all, their own efforts, good governance, fighting corruption, respecting human rights, setting up tax structures. That's the most important, the biggest pillar. Otherwise, countries will not make progress. Secondly, with public funds, with development cooperation, we can create lighthouses of innovation, exchange, vocational training and research. And the third pillar is trade. But also for economic growth, the compact countries rank very well. We support not only the compact countries, I just want to let you know briefly that beyond that, our approach is to forge reform partnerships under the umbrella of the compact. That's what we want to do. And right now, there are 5 reform partner countries that we work with. My ministry, Ms. Flaxbart, the State Secretary is here, Norbert Bartler, we have decided to move away from the scattergun approach, giving a little bit here and there to 50 countries. We will shortly present a concept to you where we focus this and formulate conditions for it. And the reform partner countries are the flagships moving ahead, starting out. 1.6 billion have been reallocated and concentrated in these countries and topics like vocational training, food security, etc. We've improved the Helmets conditions. Africa Connect was launched. I'm just going to give you just a few buzzwords. And the DEG, the German Investment and Development Company, has suffered a lot of pressure from us, but you withstood it and you have delivered. I would like to thank you for it because it's not an easy task. I would also like to thank the Ministry of Finance and the Minister of the Economy. All of that needs to be coordinated. I would like to thank you for enabling us to present these instruments today. And we've already signed agreements. You have just witnessed the many things that have been launched up to the economic network that offers support services. We are going to put all these support measures together. We agree together with Peter Altman. There's one telephone number. We will have one telephone number. If Henry Kissinger asks, who do I call? Or if you ask, who do I call if I have a project where I need some investment support, this hotline is set up. Thank you to Peter Altmaier. And just briefly, we have an excellent partnership with the World Bank. This is also important, together with David Malpass, the African Development Bank. Mr. Desina, thank you so much. You also explore uncharted territory of innovation. I would also like to thank my colleagues from the German Parliament that we have a partisan approach to this, and the coalition under the finance minister was the only one to increase by 500 million our budget, and we will invest it in climate protection, in climate adjustment measures, in market introduction programs for renewable energies in Africa. Africa, and it's a central point next to food. Africa must not become the black continent of coal, with energy supply relying on coal. If every African household is electrified over the next 20 years, and it's coal-based power plants that supply the electricity, it's going to be 1,000 new power plants. So climate protection will work only if we rely on new energies and if we exchange our knowledge with our African friends. And this is why 2 weeks ago we founded a hydrogen methanol research platform, and we are going to seek for a cooperation on methanol production in Morocco at first for the African countries, but also for a new cooperation partnership with Europe for the future. A new mindset and new development cooperation creates new growth, a fair partnership for peace, employment, and the future. That's our common goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Müller, but you actually should be on stage right now as we continue the discussion on reform financing agreements. I'd also like to welcome onto the stage, representing the World Bank Group, Mr. Le Ouerou. I'd also like to invite Mr. Stefan Meyer from the Federation of German Industries. Please welcome onto the stage. You can grab a microphone there. I ask you one question each. All right, so before we go to the signing, I'm just going to ask you one question each, and then we'll proceed. Beginning with Minister Müller, what are the objectives of reform financing agreements? What are the objectives of reform financing agreements?
Wir haben ein neues Instrument auf dem
Well, we do have a new instrument here. And together with our reform partner countries, we can sign treaties on reform financing or agreements on reform financing. These agreements have to be put into practice by the countries then, as, for example, implementing financial structures and tax structures, audit systems, financial control, financial oversight, and we finance these reform steps. That's what we mean when we talk about reform financing.
Okay, thank you. I was just waiting for the translation to wind up. And to you, Dr. Meyer, which reforms are especially important for German business?
I think we need a lot of progress, certainly in still improving the business environment in many African countries. There was a lot of improvement in the past years, especially in the Compact with Africa countries. But finally, as the previous panel made clear, we still have hurdles in the infrastructure, in the governance of trade and investment. And I think there's still further improvement necessary, and I'm very confident that the project Compact with Africa will contribute to this improvement.
I'm also quite optimistic. Mr. Le Ouerou, how does reform financing promote private sector engagement?
Thank you. Thank you very much. For us, it's absolutely critical. I'm representing President Malpass from the World Bank, but I'm the IFC CEO. IFC is the private arm of the World Bank Group. So I am a consumer of reforms, and we need them. If you want to expand the private sector, and we need to expand the private sector, I had my economists do some quick computation. We need to create 1.7 million jobs a month in the continent of Africa. Without the private sector, this is impossible. It's absolutely impossible. You cannot solve the equation. Now, how do you expand the private sector? Yes, we finance projects. That's what we do at IFC without government debt, because in many countries, the fiscal space is reduced. So that's why I embrace this Compact for Africa and the philosophy. I think that it's very important for us. Now, to your question specifically, it's very important, and the signature today is very, very important. We need the reform. I can give you a very quick example. When Egypt opened up the energy sector, we crowded in $2 billion of solar panels. It will generate near Aswan, you know, the famous dam. We will generate as much as electricity with this solar panel than the whole Aswan Dam. Why? Because there was a reform. They opened up the sector to the private sector, and the private sector was able to crowd in a lot of financing and investment and solutions to the electricity problem. But that's true in many, many sectors. So for us, reform is critical. You open more opportunity for private sector to thrive, to invest, and thrive. So
Thank
for us,
you.
it's critical.
Thank you very much. And I'd now like to invite Minister Müller to the table. Thank you to the two gentlemen. And to sign these agreements on cooperation with the World Bank and reform partner countries, I'd like to invite Honorable Adama Coulibaly, the Minister of Finance and Economy from Côte d'Ivoire. The signatures, as we heard, are very, very important. And as that is happening, I would like to please ask Ambassador Mulu Solomon from Ethiopia to just be ready to come up on stage. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Minister Coulibaly. Ambassador Solomon, please take a seat. As the ink meets the paper, I would like Mr. Andreas Utermann and Professor Nagel to please prepare to come on stage. Minister Müller, please join me back on this table. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Yes, you may take your seat. Yeah, we continue with one more question for you. What challenges do you think SMEs and startups face in Africa? Oh, you're cheating, looking at my notes. Which challenges do SMEs and startups face?
Also zunächst möchte ich nochmal den beiden danken.
First of all, I would like to thank Côte d'Ivoire and Ethiopia. We are engaging in a new path of financing for these two countries. For startups, we have different programs, separate programs. It is one of the focuses of the investment forum. We send out different signals. German countries invest in African countries together with other European countries. They agree on cooperations with African plants, with African companies, something that I've been talking about with the Egyptian president before. Also, vocational training for skilled workers on both sides. And then we also invest in another fund. It is the Africa Connect and Grow Fund. And with this, we want to help specifically young startups with venture capital. Our colleague Adesina, President of the African Development Bank, is a decisive figure in this context. He has to manage the implementation of these funds. We're deeply convinced that Africa has to grow from inside and from the grassroots. There are so many young, intelligent people who have fantastic ideas, but they cannot find any capital. And this is what we want to foster.
Bank. Are they both? Oh, they're behind me. Please join me here, gentlemen. Mr. Uterman, perhaps you can take the first question. What contribution can Allianz make to Africa grow?
Microphone. Yes, first of all, I'd like to say that, of course, we're delighted because Allianz is involved in this fund in two different dimensions. Firstly, we're the fund manager as Allianz Global Investors, but also we're providing a significant amount of the capital in the fund. And this, of course, forms part of a pledge that Oliver Bäte made at the UN Climate Summit in September to invest about $1 billion over the future in Africa. I think the second aspect that's really important here is something which has been mentioned several times today, which is the real crucial importance, if we're going to bring private capital to Africa, of public-private partnerships. And this fund, Africa Grow, is an embodiment of that. And finally, specifically to the fund, I think there are three aspects I'd like to specifically highlight. Firstly, obviously providing, and you just said it, startup capital to small and medium-sized companies that are based in Africa. Secondly, and very importantly, because this is an impact fund, working towards the UN social development goals, which is obviously very important in the continent Africa. And finally, and I think this is really important, this is a trailblazing fund. So hopefully by establishing a track record, this will then entice other public sector funds as well as private pension funds to invest more money in Africa.
Professor Nagel, the KfW Development Bank has been financing SMEs in Africa for over 50 years. I'm curious how this approach of Africa Grow is different to existing ones.
So I guess we do a mix-up of languages, so I will answer in German, because I guess it's important to say something very, let me say, pronounced to really make crystal clear why it is so important that we have Africa Grow. I
do believe that this fund is a real milestone for Germany because of many aspects. It's a milestone, first of all, for Germany because we manage this fund from Germany, but also because of its structure. We can combine private capital and public capital under one roof to get more leverage. And Minister Müller has just everything that I wanted to say already. We can thus get smaller and middle-sized enterprises to go to Africa and to foster them, to promote them. Africa is supported by young people who want to change something. They need venture capital. They need this input from our side, and we create a basis for these new enterprises to create growth and also to create employment in Africa. This is what Africa needs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Uterman and Mr. Nagel. Minister Müller, please remain on stage. Africa Connect is what we're going to be discussing next. And for that, I'd like to invite Mr. Hansold, who is the owner and general manager of DTRT Apparel, or Do the Right Thing, which is based in Ghana. And as he gets on stage, Minister Müller, I'm curious to know from you what opportunities you think the African market can provide for German and European companies.
Yes, thank you very much. So that's what I've just said. And the African market is the growth market of the future. You're a young woman. We know that in 20 years, Africa's population will have doubled. Africa is making a huge leap of 50, 60 years towards the future. We cooperate with the initiator of Smart Africa, and he has told us that during the last 6 to 8 years, 700 million cell phones were sold in Africa, especially to younger people, meaning that half of the population is connected to the net. This is a real explosion. I've also talked about consumer goods. I've talked about mobility. What would you use if you're in Maputo? Of course, today you will use a car with a combustion engine. You wouldn't take a bike. But we have to create new offers.
Very much. Mr. Hanslut is here. We're also joined by Mrs. Leibach. Thank you for bringing yourself here before I invited you. She's the chairperson of the management board of DEG. No, it's very well. So, Mr. Hanslut, what does DTRT, Do the Right Thing? Why does it invest in Ghana?
It's great to be here. So DTRT, which stands for Do the Right Thing, Tue das Richtige, is West Africa's largest apparel manufacturing company, and we're located in the capital city of Ghana, in Accra. We produce apparel with a very strong focus on sustainability. So we've been able to start in 2013, and we today have over 2,500 people that work for us. So our industry has a great opportunity to drive economic growth and especially employ a tremendous amount of people. Our plan for DTRT is to grow to over 10,000 people within the next 5 years.
Fantastic. And to you, Frau Leibach, how does Africa Connect support companies like DTRT?
Yeah, as Mark Hansel just mentioned, I mean, it's about growth and creating more jobs. And for that, financing is obviously needed. Financing needed at very good terms and conditions, be it on the terms, but be on risk sharing as well. And we are very delighted with Mark Hansel and his company to work together on the finance side on the one side, on the other side in really providing expertise and know-how which we have gained through our network for being more than 60 years in Africa. And being able to support not only by financing, but by other means like advice in terms of social standards, in terms of environmental standards, in terms of working conditions. And it has been also pretty short yet, our relationship, but a very, very trustful and promising relationship in bringing things forward in Ghana and with the corporations, with the German corporations investing there.
Herr Hanslut, Frau Leibach, Dankeschön. We're running out of time.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, this lady is the person behind this number you call. Das ist die Frau hinter der Nummer. Wenn Sie anrufen zu Grow oder zu Connect,
If you now
dann
make a
hebt sie
call
ab.
to Grow or to Connect, it's this lady who will answer.
But I'm very glad that I'm supported by a great team of DEG people, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to get that all done from June to October this year.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Minister Müller, please remain on stage. We're not done with you. Right now, though, I'd like to invite a series of people who are part of a special initiative on training and job creation. And as they're coming on stage, there'll be a video which will be playing in the background. Henning Jens from VW South Africa, Bernhard Martes, the head of German Association of the Automotive Industry, Dr. Jörg Moseloff, and Thomas Rulke, Professor Frank Strauber, and Tanja Gurner.
Africa has enormous potential. With the Special Initiative on Training and Job Creation, the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, is promoting private investment in African partner countries, with the goal of creating 100,000 jobs and 30,000 apprenticeships. The Pan-African Mobility Alliance, PAMA, is one part of this.
PAMA ist eine gemeinsame Initiative unseres Ministeriums, des Ministeriums für wirtschaftliche Zusammenarbeit und Entwicklung und der deutschen Automobilindustrie, um afrikaweit in partnerschaftlicher Zusammenarbeit einmal Wertschöpfung vor Ort zu unterstützen und zu verstärken und aber auch Fragen der Mobilität Afrikas aufzugreifen.
This initiative creates a win-win situation, offering business opportunities for enterprises and future prospects for young people in our partner countries.
La solution, c'est d'impliquer les entreprises dans le processus de formation. Grâce à l'introduction du système dual allemand, le taux d'insertion est de 92%.
Great. I'd now like to invite Mr. Bernhard Martes, who's the head of German Association of the Automotive Industry. I know that you're here in that capacity, but of course representing this alliance. What motivates you and the automotive companies to participate in the alliance?
Ganz einfach, Afrika.
Very simple. Africa, the interest of our member companies is increasing the interest of them in Africa. We want to help building bridges, going to Africa to invest there. And it's about sustainable mobility, but also about growth and jobs that need to be created. That's our motivation.
Thank you very much. And in the interest of time, I'd just like you to gather around for a photo opportunity. Of course, the MOU has already been signed, and that's what's being handed to you. And this is just for the photo. Please go in front of the table so that we can avoid that in the photograph, if possible. Can you please stand in front of the table? Yeah.
Wir haben gemeinsam eine Absichtserklärung.
We have a joint MOU of our ministry, the businesses present here, and the Association of the Automotive Industry and the Technical University of Berlin. It's about the Pan-African Mobility Alliance, as you have just seen. And Mr. Mattes, he is the boss of German automotive manufacturers. Some people from Africa might not know him, but this desire is really very, very pressing to find cars and commercial vehicles that are really appropriate for Africa. And I've spoken about the hydrogen and methanol project. Renewable energies must be the future for African mobility. And here's the second woman that you absolutely need to know, apart from my state secretary, Ms. Flaxbach. Tanja Gönner is the board speaker of GIZ. So we have a federal company, the GIZ, that is your contact in any country in the world when it comes to implementing projects, finding a contact, innovation. Tanja Gönner, thank you very much for the great cooperation that we've been having with you.
Don't forget about the photo. The photo, yeah. Super, thank you very much. Thank you to all of you. Minister Müller, we're still together. Now it's time to invite the Martin Bauer Group to sign the strategic partnership on sustainable value chains. And for that, I'd like to invite to stage Mrs. Wedel Klein and Mr. Wedel, who are both co-owner and general manager. Minister Müller, before we go ahead with the signing, I would like to put a question to Frau Wedel. What are you planning under the together with your cousin, Mr. Wedel, not to be confused for your husband, you do lead the Martin Bauer Group. What are you planning under the SDG Compact?
Thank you. So our mission is to establish sustainable supply chains for our products. The SDG Compact's goal for us is to establish demo farms in various African countries for this purpose. We perceive the signing, actually, as an appreciation for our previous collaboration. Throughout the last 3 years, we very successfully operated together a project in Zimbabwe that was supported by the BMZ's Develop Program and DNG. We cultivate organic quality plants on demo farms. Thereby, as many as 400 permanent and 500 seasonal new jobs were being created, and 5,000 people were getting trainings. This project is to be scaled now to further regions, and we are very much looking forward to working together in that partnership with the BMZ and DEG, and together create perspectives in Africa for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Wedel. And I'll now invite you to join the side table so that you can sign the letter of intent. Great. Thank you very much to the Martin Bauer Group.
Haben wir das, Sie müssen auch, oder? Ja, bitte. Ich habe mir das nochmal natürlich genau angeschaut.
Of course, I had another close look at this, so you can see this directly. The investment is 18 million over the next years, and it's 35% of public funds. This is the subsidy that we provide, and you will support 10,000 workers on those farms. They will work for you there. In the future, yes, so we assume that it's going to be more than 100,000. I had just mentioned, obviously, it's about herbs, and you can only harvest them at a certain time. So we have lots of seasonal workers. This is how this proud number comes about. Zimbabwe is a very good example with 400 permanent jobs and 500 seasonal jobs. So that's quite an impact that we can generate with your support.
Thank you to you too. Yeah, Minister Müller, please join me back on this table. I see you're taking your job as a moderator very seriously as well. So now we invite SAP for the signing of a strategic partnership in the digital economy. And for this, I'd like to invite Mr. Selfridge onto the stage. And as he's on his way, Minister Müller, the focus of this SDG compact lays in digital economy. You already pointed to this earlier in your speech, but why do you think this topic is so important?
We now have a special partner here, and I'm not totally familiar with this project. Could you let us know what this project cooperation looks like?
Ah, yeah, okay. Tell us something about your specific project.
Yeah. Well, we have a number of projects. I think this one, this partnership is very exciting for us because it gets back to our core mission, our core vision, which is to help the world run better and improve people's lives. There are a number of applications that we could use in this particular context. For example, removing slavery from the supply chain, assisting with education, bringing education to rural communities, helping with some of the rural farmers bring their products to market. So there are a number of answers to that question.
Well, with that said, why do you think it's so important to cooperate with BMZ rather, instead of implementing this on your own?
Sure. Well, I think the topic's been covered very well today about improving or expanding impact. I think for us, that's the simple answer. How do we expand our footprint? How do we expand our impact? And simply the public-private partnership model is the best way to do that, we've found, particularly in Africa.
Great. So I'd like to invite you both to the side table to sign a declaration of intent. Thank you to Mr. Selfridge and to Minister Müller. Minister, you.
New information. SAP, please. Es ist eine total spannende Firma, das wissen wir.
SAP is a very exciting company. We all know that. But SAP and the BMZ will be carbon neutral. Ladies and gentlemen, we have launched an alliance, climate and development, and I would like to invite you all. We will be carbon neutral, and the ministry has gone through a 2-year process, and big companies like SAP, Munich Re, and 500 others have joined the alliance over the first 6 months. It's an initiative that I wanted to announce here, and I would like to thank you, because SAP was one of the pioneers leading the way as one big international company. Carbon neutral in the business, in the company, in the ministries, and in the
Minister Müller, your work here today is done.
authorities.
You've been a fantastic co-moderator. Thank you for your new role.
Thank you so much. Thanks. I'm ready now.
Yes, fantastic. You're ready. You're hired. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to invite back onto the stage Dr. Stefan Meyer, who's a member of the Executive Board of the Federation of German Industries, to moderate the next panel discussion.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the last panel. According to the program, it should be 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so I ask you to set your clock 25 minutes back, then we can have half an hour for our discussion. But I think this is not really realistic, so I would like to limit ourselves to about 20 minutes, which should be possible, as we already lost one of our panelists, Kambumi Adesina, CEO of the African Development Bank, had already to leave. He has an appointment with the Chancellor, and we all know that you should better not be too late at these meetings and appointments. Our panel will focus on the partnership between investors and development cooperation. You have to remove the table, yes, then I take my paper. Business promotion and development cooperation have for many years, even for decades, been two worlds apart. This has changed in the past years. Both pillars are more and more integrating. The Compact with Africa is certainly contributing to that, and we will briefly discuss before the hall is completely empty about this relationship. So I invite to the panel first Mattea De Mastia. She is founder of Fee2Trace. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Fee2Trace offers a platform that brings together African food to farmer producers with clients from industrial countries. You haven't invested so far in Africa. You did? Oh, so I needed some update of my information, but you will talk about this later. Then I would also like to introduce Mr. Michael Gotche, who is the Vice President of the Market Area Africa of BASF. BASF has a long history in Africa. I think you have been on the continent for more than 100 years. Thank you very much for coming, and please join us. And finally, I have to check here. Yes, now I found the right paper. Sorry for this. Olaido Osoka. She is CEO of Daystar Power, a company that provides clean energy to business and consumers in West Africa. Welcome on the stage. Thank you for coming. So I start with you, Mattea, because you are also part of a project we started, which is right at the interface of business promotion and development cooperation with the assistance of GIZ, creating perspective, a project which very much focus on East Africa. You have partnered with the project, so perhaps you are in a good position to talk about what is the relationship of an investor to development cooperation, how important is it for you to link up to development cooperation?
Does it work?
Yes, it works.
Okay, so thank you very much for the question. I have put some notes here that I will not repeat what was already said, okay? So it's for the company, which is small company and which is startup, and Africa is an opportunity. We we are extremely lucky to get in touch with the Creative Perspective GSZBM, okay? Why? It was not actually about the money in the first place, and it was not even about the Africa, because we know Africa very, very well, but they bring us a partner which was for us a perfect match. And it was a company which is called Tensensis, and they were looking for the blockchain solution for the transparency and traceability topics. And we from Europe, we come and said, oh my gosh, we know how to do it. And when I got a call from GIZ, they said, we do have a partner for you. I jumped and I was on my flight to Nairobi after, I think it was in 2 days. And after a week, we have a partnership. And after 1 month, we got support, which was about, I don't know, maybe 18,000 euros. But it was to make it the feasibility study. And without this feasibility study, which was done in 2 months, we will never be capable to launch, and it is about today in Nairobi, which is the first software which really track and trace. Now I will tell you what. About 20% of global macadamia production from the farmers, which is about 30,000 farmers, through the supply, which is going to the processing of the Tensensis, and then it's going to Europe and United States. So thank you, Creative Perspective, thank you, GIZ, to offer us this opportunity.
Could you talk a little bit more about the character of the partnership? What kind of partnership is it? Is it a kind of joint venture, or what kind of relationship?
This is also a good one. First we come there and say, wow, we are a startup, we will do everything for you. This doesn't work. We figure out that what is important is to have the partnership, and we make the cooperation agreement that we will develop this software together. So let's see how it will go. It's supposed to be the joint venture in the near future. I will report on this, but it was development cooperation. It was not we are selling, you are buying.
Okay, so it's also kind of gradual approach. You're starting with this relationship, and then you also really see how it develops.
Let's put it was gradual, yeah. I learned a little bit, I was woman, I was much older than everybody there, But yeah, it was a partnership, We go through turbulences up and down. We are still going, but it's moving, and we are very happy to be there. It's a big, big market for us.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Gottschalk, you represent a big company which is, I would say, not really in need of assistance by development cooperation. Nevertheless, you cooperate a lot with them. You have several projects where development institutions are involved. What is the kind of support you need, and what is the relationship you have to development institutions as BASF?
Yeah. First of all, yeah, we have been in Africa quite a long time, already 90 years. We are present in 10 different countries, and we have 9 production sites in Africa, and we employ roughly 1,000 people. So you're right to say, do we as a company really need support? You need to understand that we are product solutions and technology provider to the manufacturing sector in Africa. And we don't need really, in fact, support for ourselves, but we are very much engaged in creating investment opportunities for our customers or potential future customers. So basically what we are doing in Africa is we are creating, in fact, the market for our products. And we are acting sometimes really like an investment broker, and here we collaborate very intensively with development institutions like the EG to attract investors to invest in economically viable projects in Africa, which then trigger also a demand for our products.
We talked before the panel some 1 or 2 hours ago about your engagement there, and you mentioned and referred to a quite successful project, AgroHub project in Kenya. Kenya is not one of the Compact with Africa countries. We think it should be one, but it's not one. Perhaps you can talk a little bit about that, and then also really tell us in concrete terms what it means to cooperate with development institutions.
Yeah, that's a quite nice project. One focus is really for us to support the development of the food value chain in Africa, because we believe that is highly attractive and will create a number of jobs there. The project in Kenya, in fact, is to create, together with an investor from Europe and the local county government in Kenya, an agri-hub which comprises potato processing. It also includes a a feed mill to produce animal feed, and it will include a poultry farm. And power is generated by solar technology and battery storage. So in fact, this entire agri-hub is self-sufficient. And the idea is that we create a showcase, which is financed by DEG right now, which is then can be replicated anywhere else in Africa, also in very rural areas, which are out of the electrical power grid. So as it produces its power demand by itself.
Okay. I would like to switch over to you. You're representing a very successful, fairly new company. Can you talk a little bit about what is the business model of your company?
Sure. So thank you everyone for persevering and for remaining. And thank you also for having a gender balanced panel. So my company, thank you. So you may or may not know there's an energy crisis on the continent. Essentially, if you look at West Africa, about 10 billion liters of diesel is consumed annually because of unreliable grids. That adds an additional layer of cost to doing business. So what Daystar Power does is that we offer renewable energy solutions to commercial and industrial clients, reducing the cost of doing business and also making it possible to compete with more industrial economies. That's in principle what we do. I guess you were also going to ask about, sorry, I took a sneak peek at your notes.
Yes.
You were going to ask
didn't hide
next. I will let you ask the question.
No, I also wanted to ask you, what role did development institutions play in setting up your business and in really developing your business? Was there any role, or did it do it without any kind of
Sure.
assistance?
I think development institutions played a critical role. I see that the DG has left, but that was... Oh, hello, DG. Hello. So the DG was actually the first institution that believed in our vision. So in 2017, when we started, we received a small upscaling facility from the DEG. And within 2 years, with that facility, we've now rolled out to more than 150 sites. We're in 3 African countries. We employ 80 people, most of whom are women. And we've really been able to scale in what is a market that really needs renewable energy solutions.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we at least should have one last round, and this is about the Compact with Africa, because this is a conference about Compact with Africa. So I would like to ask you, Mr. Gotcha, first, what role does this Compact with Africa play for your investment decisions? Do you particularly focus on those countries who are partner countries in the Compact, or isn't really not a major issue in investment decisions you make?
What we see first of all there is, and it was addressed beforehand, yeah, there is, we can, from a German perspective, act as or the German government as act a donor, but there is also a counter side, which it needs to first of all, the will to cooperate, to collaborate, and to receive funding. And what I see with great pleasure that especially the countries of the Compact with Africa are developing very positively into the right direction with regards to ease of doing business, etc., transparency of doing business in these countries. And this is a key criteria for us as a company for investments. Yeah, so I wouldn't say that we only focus on Compact with Africa countries, but transparency and ease of doing business is a key criteria for the final decision.
Yeah, I would also like to ask you the same question, Ms. Usuka. Is the Compact with Africa a project of any relevance to you? Does it signify a certain reform orientation of the governments you cooperate with, or does it have any effect on your business decisions?
I think it plays some role, but because of the industry that our business is set in, it transcends sort of these policies, right? Because if you're running a business or you're in a community where there's no access to power at all, you're not waiting for Compact Africa or for policy reform, right? The private sector is moving in the direction of sustainable energy with or without Compact Africa, although Compact Africa has its benefits.
Okay. Yeah.
For us, I was today learned, about the Compact Africa, and I think that there are several countries which might be very relevant for us. The only thing what I'm not very sure is about the amount of the money, We are not looking for millions, okay? For us, I know who I have to call now. It would be a little less, availability of the funds after this first support will be extremely important for us. So anything what can happen in the countries which produce, but not only commodities, not only cocoa or coffee, but the commodities which are important for medical or pharmaceutical companies would be extremely important for us. So I need much more information. I would be extremely happy if we can discuss with someone how to move these digital solutions further, which are important for farmers, but are going for the agri-processors.
Okay. So thank you very much. This was a very quick and efficient panel. I think to do justice to you, we have to invite you to the next G20 Africa conference to continue this panel. And then we will start with this panel. Thank you very much. And also thank you to all who are left in the hall. And I take over to Edith Kimani.
Thank you very much to all of us here in this room. We've come to the end of our program, and I'd very quickly like to thank the people and the organizations that made this possible. Of course, the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy here in Germany, our strategic partner Siemens, and you can see all the sponsors on your program. We have Gauf, Giesecke and Devrient, KfW Bank, AKA, Deutsche Bank, Herrenknecht, Strasbourg, Sysmex, and Volkswagen. My name is Edith Kimani. Thank you for being with me from morning right up until this point. Do have yourselves a fantastic evening.